get the bottles out the case. Shorty got a body like she caught a case. Out of this world, give us some space. Boss, about to let you set the pace. I wanna get in, you look like a safe.
Straight from the Middle East, lit like a rocket. Give me a bit, I'm a rocket. Feeling like Rocky, fit in my pockets. Bipolar man, humble and cocky. They try to copy, give me the money. I need my greens like it's broccoli. I ain't trying to ball on the budget. Man, I got drip like a hole in the pocket.
The success of the other person is more important than my success, first thing. And then second of all, I believe that we are 9 billion people on Earth. Like 9 billion people on Earth. And like you said earlier on, that fingerprint. We're 9 billion and we all have different. Fingerprints. So the moment I take you as a competitor, then I close myself from learning from you.
And you're live on Dead Radio.
Welcome to another very special episode of Dead Radio with your boy Ini. And once again, we have a very special guest in the building reporting live from the Dead Store, 138 SMUTS. We're going to get into our guest's life story, extract jewels for you guys to use in your everyday lives. And we're going to let our guest introduce themselves. So without further ado.
Hello, I'm Tatenda, Chidora. I'm a photographer. I love to refer myself as a visual storyteller.
I love that. I love that. How are you feeling right now? In this second?
In this second?
In this very second.
I feel good.
Okay.
There's a bit of sun creeping in, so I feel actually very warm.
It's charging the melanin up.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
That. So to predict the future, right, we have to go into the past.
Yes.
And to know who Tatenda is today, I think we have to start your book from page 1.
Whoa.
Tell us about where Tatenda grew up and him as a young man. What type of young man were you?
Jeez. So I was born and bred in Zimbabwe. I've been in South Africa since 2008.
Okay.
That's just a little after I just finished off school. And then my youth was basically in Zimbabwe.
Where did you grow up in Zimbabwe?
I grew up in, I was born in Harare.
H-Town.
Went to boarding school in a random town in Mashonaland West called Mazowe. I went to boarding school, best time of my life. And then spent a few, 4 years after school in a town called Gweru, where I think I really encountered some great humans that have shaped my life actually even up to now creatively. So it was such a small town, funny enough, but very diverse people. I think probably the most creative people I've actually met. So I think the whole journey sort of started
there.
Yeah.
After school.
When
you're surrounded by this community of people.
Yes.
So before then, you had never tapped into the creative part of your mind?
I had, but never would have thought that it would be like a career. I wanted to be a chef, but executing it was not like the most prominent thing at that time. We were going through like a hard time in the country. Initially, when I moved to South Africa at first, I'd gotten an entry to one of the hotel schools, and then life went south in a way, and then there was just like a lot of evolving, to be honest. But I think from a photographic perspective, I always had a love for magazines.
That's where it begins.
That's where it began.
Okay. Yeah. What magazines were you reading? Fashion magazines?
Mostly, my mom used to collect like Your Family. So we always had like Your Family magazine, House and Home. So I always used to be intrigued by the images that I would see there. And I remember like even at an early age, I would cut out images from magazines, and I'm like, it's for school project, but just like from enticement. And I always used to like spend a lot of time going through the magazines. So I always say to people that subliminally I built my visual form of literacy.
from magazines.
From magazines.
And I think we all did, like, because magazines basically became Instagram, right?
Yes.
And all of us literally saw the world through magazines.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Are you, as a OG magazine lover, are you a bit mad that everything has gone digital?
Yeah, I love, just the smell of print. Newspaper. I remember early ages, like not even early ages, like the earliest part of when I decided photography could be a thing. There used to be a newspaper called The Times. And in the middle of the page, like in the middle of the newspaper, every single day they had top 10 of 10. And every single day it was a different conversation. So there could be top 10 of pets, top 10 of cities, top 10 of a story. There's a photographer called Alan Sky. He's a Joburg, one of Joburg's renowned photojournalists, and another photographer called James Ottaway. And they used to like contribute a lot. So they did like beautiful, poignant stories of Soweto, of Johannesburg, like a beautiful documentation of the city. So every time I bought the magazine was
you would go straight for that.
And it happened to be a double spread in the middle of the newspaper. So it was always like a treat. And it's like, oh, I wonder what's in today.
I get that. Talk to me about the beginning of your love for photography. Is that when you're with that community of people after school? Like, what's going on in your life when you find photography and start believing that, this could actually be a career for me?
You know what happened was I decided to buy a camera. I think it was 2010. And then the intention was to try and experiment to create the images I was seeing in magazines. And then I remember I bought the camera. I was super confident, but it went south. It went south because I was just like, it's not making sense, because I just thought to myself, click the shutter and then voila. But eventually I kept on practicing. And I had a good friend of mine. I owe him, actually, because he was studying jazz at the Tshwane University of Technology. So I always used to take portraits of him. And he was like, dude, Kudzai, his name is Kudzai. And he's like, dude, your images are everything. I'm just like, I don't get it.
So you didn't even see it at that time?
No, I didn't see it. And he was like, Pino, come take me a picture. I'm having a lunch hour concert. I take a few pictures while he's there playing. He's like, oh my God, these are beautiful. And then he then insisted, and he's like, no, you have to come see the photography department. And then I just said to him, nah, you are pushing it too much. Now you say my images are good.
Yeah, now you want me to go to.
So, I mean, he was too fast forward for my liking. And then I remember the one time I was just like, okay, cool. I think let's just do it.
Cool, yeah.
We went into the department, and then boom, bang, tree. The first thing I saw when I walked into the department was the images that looked like the images I was seeing in the magazines.
In the magazines, okay.
And then eventually I just thought to myself, okay, this will make so much sense, me coming over to come study here.
Okay. So now that you've seen this and your eyes are wider, how do you start working on your craft and getting better? Like, what are the actual practical steps? Because I always feel like people like you who've reached excellence in whatever craft you do, you guys never actually tell us, how do you actually become a master at the craft? So how did you do it? Were you taking 1,000 photos? Like, how did that happen?
I think first step was to master technique. I think which is just the basics. You have to know your camera. I remember one of my lecturers at school used to say, if I call you at 2 a.m. in the morning and I ask you to give me the formula or the numbers of aperture in their order, it should be at the back of your mind.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
If I ask you to close your eyes and then I ask you to scroll or just maneuver your hands around the camera, you should know that this button does this without actually looking at it. So it was for me, first of all, because I was also quite nervous because then I had the privilege then to go to university then, but it wasn't my first love. So food was my first love. I came to South Africa. I was supposed to go to a hotel school. That didn't come together because of finances. I did a bit of work. And then eventually when the privilege came for me to go to university, and then everyone at home is asking me, so have you thought where you want to go to, what you want to do? Everyone had thought, oh, culinary arts. And then all of a sudden, no, I want to be a photographer. Then everyone was just like, okay, well, what is happening? So I remember when I enrolled at the university, and then starting, I had a hunger for the medium. I was, even up to today, I'm always on the tip of my toes. Every time I click the shutter, it's a privilege because it could have been someone else and it could have been another translator of whatever is placed in front of the person. But whatever client or whatever person that I'm working with have chosen my translation. So I think the early steps that I got to was basic technique. So I learned what this does, what aperture does, what shutter speed does, what ISO does. And then I think the most primary thing about being a photographer is your personal relationship with light. So I think more than anything else, there are rules to light. There's a guideline to light, but you have to have a personal prescription, a personal love, a personal understanding. You sort of like have to hug light in a different way, because it has to be. You have to translate normal LED light. You have to translate the sun.
Yeah, natural light.
Natural
the
light.
greatest light of all.
And I think, and everything tries to mimic the actual sun because it gives you almost every temperature that you can think of that we try dial in our camera. So I think when you study, for me it's a lifeline, life continual study when it comes to light. I mean, from light you get shadows, you get highlights. Each and every aspect has got some sense of romance that it adds to the image.
I get that.
So I think from the beginning, I had to embrace every little bit of any element that could edify to creating an image. So before I even get to models, to what do I want to...
before we even got there.
Before we even get understanding, seeing light. Because also remember, as a photographer, anyone can take pictures.
That's true.
But as a photographer, we only start from where people finish off when it comes to thinking about imagery. So when people say, no, we've taken the pictures, they was like, okay, cool. I need to find something different.
Damn. So now you start from the bottom, learning the basics, right? The foundation. How do you then start honing into your fingerprint in terms of like your style, right? Because a lot of people in various crafts, industries, when they start out, they start copying people that they idolize, and then eventually they find their fingerprint. How did you find your fingerprint? Because your images are so distinct.
Thank you.
How long did it take for you to actually get to the center of your truth?
I think have I reached? I doubt. I think it's still an ongoing process for me. And I think just as human beings, we are constantly evolving and experiencing. So I think for me, it was 2013, I was doing my second year and we had an assignment. And I remember that year was just like a difficult year for me, like because we also had to do like a personal project. And I remember my lecturer, she refused all the ideas I came up with. And then just before the end of the year, I needed to build a body of work. And we had experimented on film. I was very lucky. We were the generation we had to do like technical assignments on film before they actually cleaned out everything. And then now everyone is just doing digital. So I remember it was a Hasselblad 500 cm black and white portrait we had to do. And we did it as an assignment first, and then after that, because I had been hitting the wall with personal projects, then I remember saying to my lecturer, I actually need to do a series of portraits. I'm going to do them in black and white. And that time I was broke as hell. So the only skill I had with film was that I'd learned how to develop film.
Okay.
So I was
in a dark room.
in a dark room and everything. So I was in a that's the only advantage I had. But I didn't have money to buy film, and that was the most expensive part.
Of course.
I didn't have money to buy film, and I also didn't have a lot of time because we were coming towards the end of the year.
Well, you have to submit.
We had to submit. So I remember the one thing that I really learned from that, and it's still an element that I always add to process, which is I think about what I'm going to do, how I'm going to execute it. And I remember I used to draw when I was much younger, but now I can't even
at all.
No, I can't even.
Crazy.
You should see my references. So I sat down and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to do a series. Was I needed 8 final images at the end of the
year.
At the end of the year, and submission was like in 2 weeks. So I remember sitting down, formulating. And I had ideas coming up in my mind. I'd already started seeing people that I could work with on campus. I was in this lovely arts campus, so we had dancers, we had drama students. So there was quite a variety of open-minded people. So I remember I did sketches for everything that I wanted to do. And then that also helped me because I managed to hustle a roll of film from my head of department. And then I remember I was able to buy 1 roll of film. So I only had 24 frames because it's medium format. So 12 from one film, 12 from the other film. And then from those 24 images, I need to have final 8 images. So then with that series, I shot 1 image, which is called Soul Window. It was one of our mates from school. He's got albinism, and there was a black hand on his face. And I think from there, my journey with portraiture was born, and from there onwards, because when I went into my 3rd year, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I already pitched for what I was going to do, and that was already that was the moment.
Interesting. As you're speaking about you guys were the last people before it turned to digital. Working with film, you have to be very precise. Yes. You can't be wasteful.
Yes.
Did that help you hone your skills?
It does, because I think one thing with digital is it's got its advantages and disadvantages.
Of course.
And if you don't have an understanding of the medium, you could click until heaven comes down, and then you can probably stumble into something.
That's great.
That is great. So I think with the efficiency of the medium being digital, it takes away from a lot of people actually sitting down to think. Really planning around it, because even now, when you just think the film process, if I go buy a roll of film, it's going to be very expensive. So I'm shoot it, I'm going to get it developed, and I still need to get it scanned, and then hopefully there is something
amazing
on the roll. So it personally for me, it slowed down my process. Even when I shoot, especially when I shoot like personal work. My process is always slower.
Okay.
So I dream, if I see an image in my mind, I dream of how I can place it. I dream about how I can bring it to life. Who am I going to work with? What am I going to do? And why does this have to be a translation to the image that I am seeing?
It makes sense why analog art is greater than digital art. Digital art it's so wasteful, like because you have a memory card. Like, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you end up graduating?
Do you?
What happens?
I did graduate.
Okay.
Definitely, I did graduate. I had to graduate.
And
I went to
then
varsity late.
what happens next? How do you start building your name outside of school, right? When you step into the actual real world. What were those steps?
So after, I was actually graced enough. While I was doing my second years, then I identified people from a commercial perspective. It was mostly commercial, whom I could tag along with, because also remember, as a photography, there is the professional side,
Yes,
which
of
we
course.
never, God help us, it's a lot. you can be a dreamy creative, but at the end of the day, cameras are professionalism. You need to buy gear. You need to at least have one or two things that are onto you. You need to get a living. You need to earn a living from the medium. So I was very lucky enough to get mentors that I worked with. So I put myself out in working with the people that were like seniors in the industry.
Okay.
So then that even fueled me while I was still in varsity to be able to. It actually took my work a little bit up, because now I wasn't only confined to the things that I was learning, but I was also in school. But I was also bringing elements and tricks that I was also finding out from the people that I was working with. So after university, then I assisted for like about 4 years. While I was also getting on my feet, building up relationships with people.
Vital.
Yeah, very. Make friends. Make friends. They're the alchemy of wealth. You need to. You need to build a community. As well, because community is everything. So then from there, I remember, I think it was probably 2018 or 2017. I think the spark where an element, because also at the same time you are assisting people and you are working with people, but you can also get lost in terms of that. And your voice of translation as a creative can also get diluted, because today you're working with this person, they don't use the light in this way, they don't like the light this way. You may be working with someone who doesn't do anything with artificial light. You're working with someone who just loves like natural light, you know. And you work, some people it's like, oh, I just shoot against a white wall and that's it. So there's a lot of things. So if you don't continue producing work, then you can get lost. You can get lost in the whole mix, and also just the essence of survival, because you're also nervous. I think when I came out of university, a lot of magazines were closing, and I remember, funny enough, I think it was Trevor Sturman was the first person to win the L award, Street Style L award. Then it was Nikita, and then it was Themba Mbuyiswa. So I remember my friend was always like, I think if we really work hard next year, when this style competition comes in,
we can get it.
We should try submit. And then the next thing, it was like, oh, Elle magazine does not do that anymore. And then magazines started closing up. So it was a very undefined time in terms of career.
The ground was shifting.
Yes. And like we said earlier on, print was going away. And where we had the idea that if we do editorials, get to work with people, we can build up like a professional body of work and a portfolio. And also at the same time, we're planting our feet in the industry. Then everything changed. There was like a huge shift that was happening then. So eventually I had to literally get myself into assisting. And then I remember 2017, Neo Serati, a great friend of mine.
Oh, he was actually here last week.
Is it?
Yeah, he was actually here.
So Neo Serati sends me a DM and he's like, hey, I want to shoot with you. I've got this brand. And I look at his work and I'm just like, Jeez, cheapers. Okay, fashion. And that time I was never a fashion guy. I was never, and even up to now, I mean, I do shoot fashion, but I think my story was I don't want to be like the conventional fashion photographer.
Billboard,
Yeah.
magazine cover.
Yes, and also at that time there was just only a sort of like a certain language that revolved around fashion photography. Bless us, we love billboards.
Of course,
you know,
of course.
but the language was for me, I'd say the language was very Caucasian, and if it wasn't done according to a London standard, it didn't make any sense. If it wasn't done to a New York standard, it didn't make any sense. But at the same time, I don't live in New York.
Yeah.
I live in this dusty, gritty place. The light is harsh at times. The light is warm. We've got these beautiful sunsets, and we're looking at all of these. But I never see any of these elements. Everything is always to a certain direction.
Yeah.
So Neo Sarati says to me, and that time we were then lucky an agent had approached us and put us in a rise board. So then then the collaboration was then we just immediately paid. It's like, okay, build an editorial. So he came with his beautiful designs. His world was like out there, and he was thinking very, very far and wide. And I was still a little bit cocooned. I do things in this way.
Yeah, of course.
I'm still learning.
Of course.
A little bit of
course.
imposter syndrome and as well. And then we did this beautiful editorial, and we posted it on Tumblr.
Yeah.
And it broke the internet.
There's a video of it on YouTube today.
Oh, really?
I actually saw it.
Oh, hectic.
Just Google yourself, you'll find it.
Okay.
You'll
So then
find
we did this editorial, and I was like, oh my goodness. And then conversations started coming around my work. I continued to experiment more. We continued with collaboration. And I think if it wasn't for that collaboration, it would have gave me sort of like a push to come out of my comfort zone, to think beyond the box as well. So then I think from there onwards, my journey just
began there.
Yeah.
Because you shoot fashion in such a unique way. That's why I spoke about your fingerprint, right? Because it's on the work, the visual art pieces.
Yes.
And it's amazing to watch. But really, what I want to ask you is, how do you balance your creative integrity versus commercialization, right? Because as a creative person, it's great to be creative and think outside of the box.
Yes.
But at the same time, it needs to be commercial.
Yes.
How do you balance both of these worlds?
Jeez, man, we need commercial work.
The billboards, the magazine covers.
Yes.
Do you ever fight with people who hire you and they want you to do the most basic thing, but you're like, yo, I really think if we do it like this, it could...
Yeah.
How do you balance
I think,
that?
you know, when you get commercial work, most of the times it's usually a brief from a client. So when the client comes to you and then they brief you, and then it's always beautiful, you can translate it the way you want. Not really the way you want, but the way that they would have said, oh, okay, we wanted A, B, C, and D. You can have in a bit of a translation to say, oh, I can add this and I can add that. We can make it beautiful. However, where it becomes tricky is when someone sees your work on whatever platform, Instagram or so, and then you shot it your way, the way you translate it, skin is as black,
Of course.
as how it is. However, you in your dream, I always say to people, my Instagram is my dreaming room. If you see stuff on Instagram, it's probably where I am at in life, what I'm facing, what I've chosen as a subject to translate. So when they come and they be like, oh, we want you to shoot it like this. I remember I had one client is like, they only saw one image. And then they was like, this is the image. We've got a whole collection. We want you to come and do this. This is exactly what we're looking for. So then there you are, moody light, you're on location and everything. However, because the mindset is always commercial, clients then tend to think, oh, my competitor doesn't have it too dark on the shadows like this. Then they come in and they turn it down. oh, why is it so gritty like this? Because so there's always going to be a battle with your very conceptual work, your very conceptual work, and especially when the idea and the approach comes from your conceptual work and then they want to commercialize it. It also has to be like a client's responsibility to be able to say, okay, no, we are actually jumping off the bridge this year. We're gonna take it as is. You give it to us with all motion blur and everything, we'll take it because that's the language. So the balance is always a conversation every day.
I get that.
To be honest, because sometimes you go too far off. Because also in the word commercial, like the word itself, commercial, is just coming from a place of selling.
Yes, literally.
So the person in marketing who at times does not even have an eye for art, for beauty, they only just think, no, we designed a t-shirt and we can't see that detail that is there.
I need the detail to sell the t-shirt.
To sell the t-shirt.
I understand. Yeah. How do you deal with competition amongst your peers internally, right? Because one thing that I feel like creatives never really acknowledge is that we're all competitive, right? Some competitive energy is constructive, as in I'm inspired by my peers, and then some is destructive, where I'm like, me and you are nemesis, and I'm going to do everything to make sure that I shoot a better picture than you. How do you deal with competition internally?
So I live in a community, and one of the things, I actually grabbed it off quite early when I was in university. I remember there was a department in our, like a section in our department, Mentorship, first of all. They wanted to close it, I think after my first year. When we went into second, he's like, no, we don't have funds for this. And then I remembered how the person that helped me go through first year, like really impacted on me. And then I decided to take on people and try help them. So first things first, competition is always neutralized by the fact that I believe in the people that are around me. So we can be, you can be a photographer, I can be a photographer. But for me personally, the success of the other person is more important than my success, first thing. And then second of all, I believe that there are 9 billion people on Earth. Like 9 billion people on Earth. And like you said earlier on, that fingerprint. We're 9 billion and we all have different fingerprints. So the moment I take you as a competitor, then I close myself from learning from you. I close myself, especially a Black creative. I close myself from learning from you. I close myself from building something that could be sustainable to making it easier for the people that are come after us.
After you,
So it's very important for me that with the people that I work with, we can actually just make it way much stronger, because there are so many hurdles as Black photographers that we have to fight. So the moment when we become competitors, I think we easily lose what the foothold and the foundation that we can actually place in the industry for us to be trusted for other bigger things that never land in our hands. So I think it's still a low-key divide and conquer when we have to.
That's true. I hear that.
When we have to fight with each other. And I personally feel for me, am I a competitive person? I always ask myself. It's always a hard question to answer, because also at the same time, translation. When I sit down to it, if we were all to get a bottle and we all go out on an assignment, photograph the bottle and bring something in. The moment you start thinking about what the other person is doing,
you're done for.
You get what I'm saying. But the moment you just take the subject, embrace it, and you tap immediately into how you would translate it at the back of your mind. Because we've got a visual literacy, we've got a visual understanding, you've got something different, you see it different. And usually from the encounters of every day, That's where we find our point of reference to life, our point of translation to life. So I think from there onwards, that then just neutralizes the element of competition. If you get it, that's great. I'm actually grateful because if they can trust someone who looks like me, maybe tomorrow it might land in my direction.
I get that. I get that. As someone who has such a distinct fingerprint, right? We're living in a time where global culture has become one culture.
Yes.
We're all surfing the same internet. We're all seeing the same things.
Yes.
We all gravitate towards the same things. How do you remain an individual at a time where mass hypnosis is happening? Like, how do you remain like, how do you even know that this is my idea and this is not an idea that I've been programmed on Instagram? Because we're living in a time where people don't even realize that, like, the thoughts that you're thinking, they're not even your original thoughts. They're just coming from the internet, and you see them 5 times a day, and then you're like, I believe this, and you're like, you actually don't believe that, you're being programmed. How do you remain free from that?
I think an important thing that really adds to my process in a way is sometimes I have to close here and actually experience everyday life. You know, one thing I really love about South Africa is diversity. You know, when I was in Zimbabwe, I remember I didn't have DSTV at my house. I used to go watch. We used to do like soap alathon, you know, at my friend's house. So every single day I'm at their house, we watch Rhythm City together, we watch Scandal together, Generations together. And the one thing that even today we always talk about is how diverse the country is. And in terms of, I think South Africans are the cousin that had privilege to feel.
That's true.
And expressionism.
I'm from Botswana, so I know exactly what you're talking about. What I'm saying? Yes.
So back at home, if I show up like this with my cornrows, it's just like,
And then?
What is happening? You get what I'm saying? So there's like always a limit. Oh, so you're not dressing punk. You're taking us, but there's always like side comments. And then you come to this rainbow nation. It is really rainbow because you can go with half cheesecloth on the side. You go to work with dreadlocks, you're relevant. If you go to work without a tie, it's all good. You can wear many colors as you want. You're in a happy place. So one thing that is taken away from us as people in this day and age, especially from ideas. I always say to people, my ideas come from experiencing life, seeing people, being in communities, listening to people, conversations with people. Some of my images, I remember my last body of work, If COVID Was a Color, it was literally just translation of things that we spoke about on an everyday basis, literally. And all the images that I translated there, even the titles of the images, they were from the start, which was, social distancing. There is a social distance. So I think the way there is no idea that is new, but the things that people have forgotten. When we bring that element of remembrance, and when we really think deep and we look, and sometimes maybe we just need to revisit some stuff that we did a while ago, and it's like, no, this doesn't work. Sometimes it's probably like archives. You know, you just need to go through. I love archives. You know, it's always like there's always something that you could always pick up from and learn from, and probably like, if I redo this today
and bring it today,
bring it in today.
I get
probably
that.
like and if you look at a lot of people from a designer perspective, like beautiful stories that have been captured, even movies. Some people really sit on archives and then they just go through like the archives after archives after archives, and then they just pull out stuff just to show where people have come from
and where we're going.
I
love that. I love that. You spoke about there's no new idea under the sun. Right? What's your perspective on AI through a 2025 lens? As we saw ChatGPT right now, I can literally go there and then prompt an image and it will spit it out in less than 5 seconds. What's your perspective from what you do for a living in terms of this new disruptive medium, I guess, or technology?
You know,
I know it's a very complicated and layered.
It's very layered. But I already feel like, you know, just from when you're texting and autocorrection, if we were to do spellings right now,
I see it in myself. Like, I'm like, I just don't know how to spell.
Yes.
How my spelling is like.
Yes. So if we take it just from that basis, AI has always been there. Siri has been there for years. You know, auto text, that's AI because it would anticipate what you're going to text. So I feel like from a visual perspective, will it take away from the creators? That's my biggest fear. Not from a monetary perspective, but from a thinking perspective.
So will AI take your body of work and the next photographer's body of work and not credit you guys? Is that what you're afraid of? Like,
could.
Because isn't that what's happening right now?
Could, because
don't humans take from each other and not reference where they got it from?
That's right. That's one point. But I also feel like AI needs to be fed for it to produce the image. So unless all humans are scanned, right? All humans are scanned, and then everything is scanned, and then when we sit down and then we prompt, then something comes up, and then we can say, oh, because of the database that AI has, then it has created, you know. But I feel from a before we even get to the prompting and everything, I feel like people are gonna get lazy to learn how to light. People are gonna get lazy to learn how to retouch, deep edging, and then you place whatever you need to place. Framing and all of that. Rules of composition. Why? Because I can just go prompt it on AI, get a reference, and then come back and recreate it, per se. You know, so there are those elements. And also at the same time, are we really going to remain being thinkers, or are we going to let gadgets think for us?
I completely understand what you're saying as an analog creator.
Yes.
But unfortunately, this sounds like the people in 1994 who were like, the internet is just a phase. It'll be gone. Because unfortunately, this genie's at the bottom.
That's true.
We're not going back. So yes, you are right. It is making us lazy.
Yeah.
The ideas are watered down.
Yes.
Like digital art is not better than analog art. But what do we do? Because you can remain the analog creator, but the person who's able to take analog and digital and AI is going to surpass you, unfortunately.
True. You are probably right.
It's just very tricky.
So I think just generally, like you say now, I feel like we always keep up to date with elements, but already down to a copyright conversation, people are already like referencing each other without even saying anything. But I feel like when we're coming to creating beautiful stuff, if you're gonna make art, you know, not just commercial photography, and I must say AI can bring in. I mean, I had a friend of mine who did a campaign. There was a sports lady that was there, and they shot this thing in an open ground, and they needed a stadium, and they prompted AI.
And there's the stadium.
You know, so there are elements that, you know, it can think and say, because it's got an idea of how a stadium looks like. But there are going to be some elements where it's like generator phase, you know. So I think as one, it's always good to keep up with times. You have to learn, you have to know. But for me, it's not really a deep dependence. I could use it for some elements of commercial work where I probably need to like find ways of, can I say, finding something new?
Yeah.
I don't really know, but you know. But when it comes to the way I perceive, if I'm going to make a body of work, my approach of making a body of work and translating something that I've perceived and thought is completely different.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that. I just wanted us to have the conversation because I feel like purists are trying to run away from the fact that this thing is here, and ignoring it is not going to help at all.
No, it's not gonna help at all.
When we started this conversation, one of the things you said was you're a visual storyteller, right? If we were to take your bodies of work and put them into a novel, right, with words, if we were to turn images into words, what would the name of that title of the book be? Because I feel like the center of your work is like melanated people. What story do you want the world to know about melanated people from your work?
I think I'll title it. I'm not good with titles.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it would.
We can skip the title, or we can maybe give us a synopsis of rather the work. Like, what do you want people to understand about the melanated people?
So I think, one of the things that that really affected me when I was growing up was my point of reference in television was always white people.
Of course.
There was always like a lot of Caucasian conversations. My favorite movies, and I'm like, when I started understanding what television was and what was on TV, if it wasn't watching Suburban Police,
wow.
Growing up,
Thank you for that reference. I forgot about that. Thank you for that reference.
So it wasn't watching Suburban Bliss, growing up, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Everything else was very Caucasian.
Right, yeah.
We went to the movies, Stekenica, Westgate in Harare. I remember watching back-to-back Titanic, My Best Friend's Wedding. Great actors. But
yeah.
I recently watched the whole series, the whole 10 seasons of Friends. And they only introduced a black character, I think, in season 10.
Is that black character
There's
Friends?
I didn't
even know that. And I've watched Friends.
Who dated Ross Geller at some point. So for me, and I even remember having a young identity crisis because I felt like I actually didn't have anything to contribute as a black person. Because also when you go to Zimbabwe, English is of stature, as much as our president was very onto blackness, but it passes your eye when everything on television is awfully quite white and quite heavily white. So coming to my body of work, I remember even with the body of work I did with Neo Serati, there was people hammering us that the guy's skin was just too dark. There was a gentleman who was sitting on a chair and he was topless and had these big, colorful pens. So people were hammering us, why is he so dark in the image?
That's crazy.
So then from there onwards, that became an essential need to my grade when it comes to black skin. So for me, it's a celebration of blackness. I've encountered a lot of people in life, even family relatives, that believed that they were too dark and needed to bleach, because it's a bit hotter up where Limpopo extension is a bit hotter. So when you look at people, they're like, no, we don't feel right. So that element of bleaching skin was very important. So when I had a platform to express myself through art, my skin had to be celebrated. I had to bring out that glory that lies within us. You know, how glorious is this light in us? I believe we are a wonder.
Yeah.
One singer does say. So for me, it's an exaltation in some form, and probably a certain level of obsession to blackness. Because if you're not obsessed about something, you can never really believe into it without a shadow of doubt. And for me, it's a place, and I've had the privilege to have shows in Europe, and when people look at it, it's just like, oh, black skin, and then they fall in love. And then they look at it, and then I've got collectors that have got some of my work, and I was like, okay, I think we are serving the right purpose, because now I can have a voice in a place where we actually never had a voice. So for me, it is utterly a simple form of just celebration. It's celebrating of the lightest black person that you can have. my one friend always says to me, you can't be his model if you are in between. It's either you have to be
Extremes. You only deal in extremes.
Extremes. And for me, it's part of it's a essential part of a language, because even a friend of mine who was working in Thailand is like, the darker you are, apparently that's the more poor you are. So for me, it's just my little ounce of contribution for recognition, to reverse the stereotype that is there, but also to have a placement for who we are as black people. It might only make sense 100 years from now, but I'll be faithful to do my little part.
You're actually pushing propaganda for us, like, which I love. Like, I always tell people that, yo, black people, we need our own propaganda. Like, fuck what the world thinks. Like, we need to push our own propaganda.
That's absolutely true.
I love that.
That's absolutely true.
Damn, this has been such an enlightening and enriching conversation for me.
Thank you.
As we wind down the conversation, right, there are going to be a lot of people who are watching this who are like, you know, I'm in film school, or I just bought my first camera, and I want to step out into the world and make a name for myself. What's your last piece of advice to that person, to the dreamers out there, to give them enough kick to step out into the world and make things happen?
I think, first of all, comparison is the killer of all dreams. So learn from people, but don't compare yourself to the other. Then it already, like we said earlier on about the element of competition, then it already kills that whole dynamic of you thinking. It kills already process. So what I would say is experiment, shoot. And you know, one beautiful thing about us as people is that we find things that intrigue us from the everyday basis. And then sometimes we don't explore them, but sometimes that's actually where your story is. Because you are intrigued by it, and then you just brush it off. As a visual storyteller, especially as an African visual storyteller, back in the day, the point of reference for imagery as well was someone had to fly in from wherever they come and experience a little bit of Africa, and they're not even black, right? So they would probably get a surface-coated translation of whatever they've been sent to come and translate, and then they go back, and that's the image of Africa. But we are Africans in Africa, living in Africa, doing Africa, you know? Yeah. So from all of that, and as much as the world has a voice, but now they've also allowed us to bring our voice to this big voice of imagery and creativity. I feel like we have the authentic contribution to visual language. So if your journey is being on a taxi every day, maybe you just need to document that, for starters. You know, if you are surrounded by people that are always like having some glam and some fashion, maybe it could be church people, it could be the Shembe people that are always outside. What if you do a study? And that's the thing, I've realized one thing that really contributes to my work is looking at something and actually studying it. Spending time with something. When you look at it, and then you look at it every day, there's going to be change throughout. When you sit down and you look at it, it's already a body of work. So keep on keeping on. You have to, the language will only be defined because remember, we start with vowels, right?
Yes,
E, I, O,
yes,
U, right?
yes.
And then you do the alphabet.
The building blocks.
We build the building blocks, and then after that, that's when we start putting words together. So maybe your A, E, I, O, U is maybe you take that nap there, look at light. It doesn't make sense today. Do it again. Go around, investigate your communities, investigate the things that are around you. Have conversation. People, I think the world changes every day, but there's always something about humans. Humans carry stories. Humans carry encounters. Humans carry experiences, And if you have conversation with people, you will find something that you can, like a thread that you can. Oh, but this is making sense. And then when you look at these images one day and you say, this was this guy's story, this was this guy's story, this was this guy's story. There's a thread. And then at the end of the day, you've got a whole beautiful body of work.
I get that. Damn. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you for having me. I was super nervous, but
everything was good, right? You didn't have to
Absolutely.
call anyone out.
No, thank you for having me. No calling out.
Even though you guys owe him money, it's fine. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode of Dead Radio from your boy Ini.